German Shepherd was being starved to make him aggressive. What baby did next? Left everyone in tears. What happened on that stormy night will leave you speechless. A 5-year-old boy made a decision that changed everything. Before we begin, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more incredible stories. The story you're about to listen to started with rain that felt like bullets against the windshield. Thunder crashed overhead as Jake Martinez gripped the steering wheel tighter, his knuckles white against the black leather. Beside him in the passenger seat, his 5-year-old son Ethan pressed his small face against the cold glass, watching the world blur past in sheets of water. "Daddy, the rain sounds angry," Ethan whispered, his breath fogging the window. Jake glanced at his son through the rearview mirror and managed a tired smile. It had been another long day at the construction site, and all he wanted was to get home, heat up some leftover pizza, and maybe watch a cartoon with Ethan before bedtime. The single-father life wasn't easy, but moments like these, just him and his boy, made everything worth it. The windshield wipers fought against the downpour as they drove through the industrial part of town. Abandoned warehouses lined the road like sleeping giants, their broken windows staring out into the darkness. This wasn't the safest area, but it was the fastest route home, and Jake was exhausted. That's when Ethan suddenly sat up straight, his small body tense with attention. "Daddy, stop!" Ethan's voice cut through the sound of rain like a knife. Jake's foot moved to the brake instinctively. "What's wrong, buddy?" "There's something moving by that fence. I saw it." Ethan pointed toward a chain-link fence that surrounded what looked like an old junkyard. Car parts and rusted metal scattered the ground like a graveyard of forgotten machines. Jake squinted through the rain, his heart racing slightly. "Ethan, we need to get home. It's probably just the wind moving some trash around." But Ethan was already unbuckling his seatbelt. "No, Daddy. It moved like it was alive. Please, just for 1 minute." Something in his son's voice, a certainty that Jake had learned to respect over the years, made him pull over to the shoulder. The rain hammered against their roof like thousands of tiny fists. Jake turned off the engine, and the silence that followed felt heavy, broken only by the storm. "Okay, but we stay in the car and we look for just 1 minute," Jake said, turning on his phone's flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness and rain, illuminating patches of mud and debris. At first, there was nothing, just an empty lot filled with the skeletons of old cars and machine parts. Jake was about to start the engine again when the light caught something that made his breath catch in his throat. Near a thick metal post, barely visible through the rain, was the outline of an animal. "There!" Ethan pointed, his small finger pressed against the glass. "I told you!" Jake's light focused on the shape, and what he saw made his stomach turn. It was a dog, a large German Shepherd, but it looked more like a ghost than a living animal. The dog was chained to the post with a thick metal collar, its body so thin that every rib was visible through matted, soaking fur. The animal sat completely still, not even shivering, as if it had given up on everything. "Oh my God," Jake whispered under his breath. "Daddy, why is the doggy tied up in the rain?" Ethan's voice was small, confused. Jake's mind raced. This was clearly animal abuse, but what could he do? Call the police? Animal control? In this storm, help might not come for hours, and the dog looked like it might not have hours left. "Daddy, we have to help him." Ethan was already reaching for the door handle. "Ethan, no!" Jake grabbed his son's wrist gently but firmly. "We don't know anything about that dog. It could be dangerous." But even as he said the words, Jake found himself staring at the animal. The German Shepherd hadn't moved, hadn't even lifted its head at the sound of their car or the light. It just sat there, defeated, as rain poured over its broken body. "He's not dangerous, Daddy. He's scared." Ethan's voice was so certain, so matter-of-fact, that it sent chills down Jake's spine. Jake looked at his son, really looked at him. At 5 years old, Ethan had always been different from other kids. While other children ran away from stray cats or barking dogs, Ethan approached them with a calmness that amazed adults. He seemed to understand animals in a way that was almost supernatural. "How do you know that, buddy?" Ethan tilted his head, still staring at the dog through the rain. "His ears aren't up. When dogs are mean, their ears go up like triangles. His ears are down. That means he's sad." Jake felt something twist in his chest. His 5-year-old son was teaching him about compassion, and the lesson hit harder than any sermon he'd ever heard. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the scene for just a second, but that second was enough. In that brief moment of clarity, Jake saw something that changed everything. The dog had lifted its head slightly and was looking directly at their car. Its eyes, even from this distance, reflected the light like two broken stars. "Okay," Jake heard himself saying, "but you stay in the car while I check on him." Ethan nodded seriously, as if he understood the gravity of the situation. Jake grabbed an old towel from the back seat and opened his door. The rain hit him like a cold slap, soaking through his work shirt in seconds. He approached the fence carefully, his phone's light leading the way. The closer he got, the worse the situation looked. The German Shepherd was enormous, probably close to 90 pounds when healthy, but now he couldn't have weighed more than 60. His collar was too tight, cutting into the skin around his neck. The chain attached to it was thick and heavy, clearly meant to restrain something much more aggressive than this broken animal. "Hey boy," Jake called softly as he reached the fence. "I'm not going to hurt you." The dog's ears twitched slightly, but he didn't move. Jake could see now that the animal's breathing was labored, and there were scars covering his body. Old wounds that told a story Jake didn't want to imagine. Behind him, he heard the car door slam. "Ethan, I told you to stay in the car!" But his son was already running toward the fence, his small feet splashing through puddles. "Daddy, look at his eyes!" Jake spun around to grab Ethan, but his son had already reached the chain-link barrier. And that's when something incredible happened. The German Shepherd, who hadn't moved for Jake's approach, slowly lifted his massive head and looked directly at Ethan. For a moment, that felt like forever. The boy and the dog stared at each other through the rain and the fence. Then, with movements that seemed to take enormous effort, the dog stood up. "Ethan, step back, buddy." But Ethan didn't move. Instead, he pressed his small face against the cold metal of the fence. "Hi, doggy. I'm Ethan. You look really sad." The German Shepherd took one shaky step toward the fence, then another. Jake's heart pounded as he watched this massive animal, trained for who knows what kind of violence, approach his tiny son. When the dog reached the fence, something happened that Jake would never forget as long as he lived. The German Shepherd gently pressed his nose against the chain link, right where Ethan's small fingers were wrapped around the metal. For just a moment, they touched, boy and dog, innocence and pain, hope and despair. And then the dog did something that made Jake's eyes fill with tears. He whimpered. Not a growl, not a bark, not a snarl, a whimper, soft and broken, and full of a pain that seemed deeper than hunger, deeper than physical suffering. It was the sound of a soul that had been shattered and was begging for just one moment of kindness. Ethan's small voice cut through the rain. "Daddy, he's not mean. He's just hurt inside his heart." Jake looked at his son, then at the dog, then back at his son. In that moment, he realized that his 5-year-old boy understood something about suffering that most adults never learned. Ethan wasn't seeing a potentially dangerous animal. He was seeing a living being in pain, and that pain called out to something pure and good inside him. "Can we take him home, Daddy?" Ethan asked, his voice barely audible over the storm. Jake's mind raced through a dozen reasons why this was a terrible idea. They didn't know anything about this dog. It could be sick. It could be violent. It could belong to someone dangerous. They lived in a small apartment. They barely had enough money for their own food, and Jake worked long hours. But then lightning flashed again, and in that moment of brightness, Jake saw something that made all his logical objections crumble. The German Shepherd had lain down at the fence, pressing his body as close to Ethan as the barrier would allow. His massive head was resting on his paws, and he was looking at the little boy with an expression that Jake had never seen on an animal's face before. It was gratitude, pure, simple gratitude for just being seen, just being acknowledged as something worth caring about. "Daddy?" Ethan's voice was small and hopeful. Jake pulled out his phone and called 911. 911, what's your emergency? "I'm at the old Morrison junkyard on Industrial Avenue. There's a dog here that's been abandoned and abused. It needs immediate help." "Sir, for animal control, you'll need to call—" "No," Jake interrupted, surprising himself with the firmness in his voice. "This is an emergency. This animal is dying." After giving the dispatcher their location, Jake hung up and looked at the dog again. The German Shepherd's breathing was getting more labored, and Jake realized they might not have much time. "Ethan, I need you to listen to me very carefully. I'm going to try to help this dog, but you need to stay exactly where you are, okay?" Ethan nodded, his small hand still pressed against the fence. Jake found a gap in the chain link where the metal had been cut and bent back, probably by vandals or scrappers. He squeezed through, his heart pounding with each step toward the dog. The German Shepherd watched him approach, but didn't move. Up close, the extent of the abuse was even more horrifying. The dog's collar had rubbed the fur away around his neck, leaving raw, infected skin. His ribs showed through his coat, like the framework of a broken building. "Easy, boy," Jake whispered, as he knelt down beside the animal. "We're going to get you help." The dog's eyes followed Jake's movements, but there was no aggression, no fear, just exhaustion. Jake could see now that the chain wasn't just holding the dog, it was slowly killing him. The metal collar was so tight it was cutting off circulation. With shaking hands, Jake examined the collar. It was locked with a heavy padlock, but years of rain and rust had weakened the metal. Using a piece of rebar from the junkyard, Jake managed to break the lock. The moment the collar fell away, the German Shepherd let out a sound that was part whimper, part sigh, part relief. He lifted his head slightly and looked at Jake with an expression that seemed almost human in its gratitude. "That's it, buddy. You're free now." Jake wrapped the old towel around the dog and carefully lifted him. The animal was heavier than his appearance suggested, but still far too light for his size. As Jake carried him toward the fence, the German Shepherd did something unexpected. He turned his head toward Ethan and let out a soft whine. "He wants to see you, buddy," Jake called to his son. Ethan pressed his face against the fence again. "I know you're scared, doggy, but my daddy is the best daddy in the whole world. He's going to take care of you." The dog's tail, barely more than skin and bone, moved slightly, just a tiny wag, but it was enough to make Jake's throat tight with emotion. By the time they got the German Shepherd to their cur, sirens could be heard in the distance. Jake laid the dog gently in the back seat, and Ethan immediately climbed in beside him. "Ethan, I don't think—" "He needs me, Daddy. Look." Jake looked into the back seat and felt his heart skip a beat. The massive German Shepherd had rested his head on Ethan's lap, and for the first time since they'd found him, the dog's eyes had closed. His breathing was still labored, but it seemed calmer now. "He trusts me," Ethan whispered, gently stroking the dog's matted fur. "He knows I won't hurt him." As they waited for animal control to arrive, Jake watched his son in the rearview mirror. Ethan was talking softly to the dog, telling him about their apartment, about Jake's job, about how they were going to get him food and medicine and a warm bed. The German Shepherd listened to every word, his ears twitching occasionally as if he understood. When the animal control officer arrived, Jake explained the situation. The officer, a middle-aged woman named Carmen, took one look at the dog and shook her head. "This is one of the worst cases I've seen," she said grimly. "Whoever did this should be in prison." "What happens to him now?" Ethan asked, his small hand still resting on the dog's head. Carmen's expression softened when she looked at the boy. "Well, first we need to get him to a vet. He needs immediate medical attention. After that—" She paused, clearly not wanting to say what usually happened to animals in this condition. "After that, what?" Jake pressed. "Honestly, dogs this traumatized and malnourished, sometimes the kindest thing is to let them go peacefully." Ethan's eyes filled with tears. "You mean you're going to make him dead?" "Sweetie, sometimes when animals are hurt this badly—" "No!" Ethan's voice cut through the rain with surprising force. "He's not ready to die. He just found us." Jake looked at his son, then at the dog, then at Carmen. In that moment, he made a decision that would change all their lives forever. "What if we took him?" Jake heard himself asking. Carmen looked surprised. "Sir, this dog is going to need extensive medical care. The costs alone—" "How much?" "Probably several $1,000s, and that's if he even survives the first few weeks. Plus, we don't know anything about his temperament. German Shepherds this size, if they've been trained for fighting or aggression." Jake looked into the back seat again. The dog was awake now, watching the conversation with intelligent eyes. When their gazes met, the German Shepherd lifted his head slightly and looked directly at Jake. In that look, Jake saw something that made his decision easy. He saw hope. "We'll take him," Jake said firmly. "Daddy, really?" Ethan's face lit up like Christmas morning. Carmen frowned. "Sir, I have to advise against this. You have a small child, and we have no idea what this dog has been trained to do." "Look at him," Jake said simply. Carmen looked into the back seat, where the massive German Shepherd was resting his head on a 5-year-old boy's lap, his eyes closed peacefully for the first time in who knows how long. "He's not dangerous," Jake continued. "He's broken. And my son—" Jake's voice caught slightly. My son sees something in him that I'm just beginning to understand. Carmen studied the scene for a long moment, then sighed. Okay, but there are conditions. The dog needs immediate veterinary care. If the vet determines he's too aggressive or too sick to save, you'll need to accept that decision. And you'll need to sign a waiver acknowledging the risks. Done, Jake said without hesitation. As they drove to the emergency vet clinic, Ethan continued talking softly to the dog. We need to give you a name, he said thoughtfully. How about Hero? Because you're going to be brave like a hero? The German Shepherd's tail moved slightly at the sound of his new name. Hero, Jake repeated, testing the word. It felt right. At the vet clinic, Dr. Sarah Chen took one look at Hero and immediately called for her team. As they carefully lifted the dog onto an examination table, Hero's eyes searched the room until they found Ethan. It's okay, Hero, Ethan called out. These people are going to help you feel better. Dr. Chen worked quickly, starting an IV and beginning her examination. After what felt like hours, she came out to the waiting room where Jake and Ethan sat holding hands. Well, Jake asked. Dr. Chen sat down across from them, her expression serious. He's severely malnourished and dehydrated. He has several old injuries that healed improperly, and there are signs of prolonged abuse. But... She paused and looked at Ethan. He's a fighter. His vital signs are stronger than I expected, and his blood work shows he's relatively healthy despite everything he's been through. So, he's going to be okay? Ethan asked hopefully. It's going to be a long road, Dr. Chen said carefully. He'll need to stay here for at least a week, maybe more. He'll need special food, medication, and a lot of care. And there's something else. Jake felt his stomach clench. What? Dr. Chen pulled out a small device that looked like a thick pen. This is a microchip scanner. All dogs in fighting rings are chipped so their owners can track them if they escape. She showed them the screen. Hero has a chip. The room fell silent except for the sound of Jake's heart pounding in his ears. What does that mean? He asked. It means someone is probably looking for him. And based on his condition and the scars I found, Dr. Chen's voice trailed off. I think Hero was being used in illegal dog fighting. Jake felt the world tilt slightly. Dog fighting. That explained the scars, the malnutrition, the training to be aggressive. Hero hadn't been abandoned. He had escaped. Daddy? Ethan's small voice broke through his thoughts. What's dog fighting? Jake looked at his son's innocent face and felt a surge of protective anger. It's when bad people make dogs fight each other for money. It's very illegal and very wrong. Ethan's eyes widened. You mean Hero had to fight other dogs? Probably, Dr. Chen said gently. But look at this. She showed them photos she'd taken of Hero's scars. Most of these are defensive wounds. He was trying to protect himself, not attack. I don't think he was very good at being aggressive. Jake thought about how Hero had responded to Ethan. The gentleness, the trust, the immediate bond. Because he's not aggressive. He's just... good. Dr. Chen nodded. Some dogs can't be trained to fight, no matter what their owners do to them. Their nature is too gentle. Based on Hero's behavior and these injury patterns, I think he was probably being starved and tortured to try to make him more aggressive. The full horror of Hero's situation hit Jake like a physical blow. This beautiful, gentle animal had been tortured for refusing to hurt other creatures. He'd been punished for being good. But he's safe now, right? Ethan asked. Dr. Chen and Jake exchanged a look over the boy's head. Ethan, Jake said carefully, the people who hurt Hero, they might try to find him. Ethan was quiet for a moment, processing this information with the seriousness that always surprised adults. Then he looked up at Jake with determination in his young eyes. Then we have to hide him really good, Ethan said simply, because Hero is ours now, and we don't let bad people hurt our family. Jake felt his eyes fill with tears. His 5-year-old son had just declared a severely traumatized German Shepherd part of their family, and somehow, that felt like the most natural thing in the world. As they filled out the paperwork to officially adopt Hero, Jake realized that this stormy night had changed everything. They'd driven out as just a father and son, and they were going home as something more. They were going home as a family. 3 days later, Jake stood in Dr. Chen's office, signing the final discharge papers. Hero had gained 8 pounds and could finally stand without trembling. His fur was still patchy and his ribs still showed, but there was something different in his eyes now, a spark that hadn't been there before. Remember, Dr. Chen said as she handed Jake a bag of special food and medications. He needs to eat small portions every few hours. His stomach has been empty for so long that too much food at once could make him sick. Jake nodded, pocketing the list of instructions. What about the other thing, the microchip? Dr. Chen's expression grew serious. I've reported it to the authorities, but honestly, these fighting rings are hard to track down. They move locations constantly. The chip is registered to a name that doesn't exist at a fake address. So, we're safe? For now, but Jake, she paused, choosing her words carefully. Dogs like Hero are valuable to these people. Not because he's a good fighter, we know he's not, but because he's purebred, large, and they've invested time in him. They might not give up easily. Jake felt a chill run down his spine, but before he could respond, Ethan burst through the office door. Hero! Ethan ran straight to the German Shepherd, who had been lying quietly in the corner. The moment he saw the boy, Hero's entire body seemed to come alive. His tail wagged, really wagged this time, and he pressed his massive head against Ethan's chest. Did you miss me, boy? Ethan whispered, wrapping his small arms around Hero's neck. I missed you so much. Hero made a soft sound, not quite a whine, not quite a bark, that seemed to say he'd missed Ethan too. Dr. Chen watched the interaction with amazement. In 30 years of veterinary practice, I've never seen a bond form this quickly. It's like they were meant to find each other. The drive home was different from the desperate race to the vet 3 nights ago. Hero sat calmly in the back seat, his head resting on Ethan's lap, watching the world go by through the window. Every few minutes, he would look at Jake in the rearview mirror, as if making sure this wasn't all a dream. Their apartment was small, just 2 bedrooms, a living room, and a tiny kitchen. But Jake had spent the last 3 days preparing. He'd bought a large dog bed, food bowls, and toys. He'd even rearranged the furniture to give Hero space to move around. When they walked through the door, Hero stopped just inside the entrance. He stood perfectly still, his nose twitching as he took in all the new smells. Then, very carefully, he took 1 step forward, then another. It's okay, Hero, Ethan said softly. This is home now. Hero looked at the boy, then at Jake, then slowly walked into the living room. He explored every corner, sniffing carefully, but never touching anything without permission. When he reached the dog bed Jake had set up near the window, he looked back at Jake questioningly. That's yours, boy, Jake said. Hero approached the bed cautiously, circled it 3 times, then settled down with a deep sigh. For the first time since they had found him, he looked peaceful. That first week passed in a blur of small victories and gentle discoveries. Hero learned that food would come regularly, so he stopped wolfing down every meal like it might be his last. He learned that no one would hurt him for making noise, so he started to make soft sounds when Ethan talked to him. Most importantly, he learned that love didn't come with conditions. Every morning, Jake would wake up to find Hero lying on the floor beside Ethan's bed, not on it, but close enough to protect the boy if needed. Every evening, Hero would follow Jake around the apartment as he made dinner, not begging for food, but simply wanting to be near his new family. It was on the 8th night that everything changed. Jake was washing dishes when he heard Hero make a sound he'd never heard before, a low, rumbling growl that seemed to come from deep in his chest. The German Shepherd was standing at the living room window, his body tense, his ears pointed forward. What is it, boy? Jake dried his hands and walked over to the window. Outside, under the streetlight across from their building, a black sedan was parked. Jake wouldn't have thought anything of it, except that he had seen the same car yesterday. And the day before. Hero growled again, softer this time, and Jake felt the hair on the back of his neck stand up. Ethan, Jake called, trying to keep his voice calm. Come away from the window, buddy. Ethan had been reading on the couch, but he immediately sensed the tension in the room. What's wrong, Daddy? Probably nothing. Just come here. But as Jake spoke, the sedan's engine started, and the car slowly drove away. Hero watched it go, his growl fading to a concerned whine. That night, Jake barely slept. Every sound from outside made him get up and check the windows. Hero seemed to sense his anxiety and spent the night moving between Ethan's room and the living room, as if he was patrolling. The next morning, Jake called Dr. Chen. I might be paranoid, he said, but I think someone's been watching our building. Jake, you need to call the police, and maybe you should consider staying somewhere else for a few days. But Jake looked at Hero, who was lying peacefully next to Ethan as the boy got ready for school, and shook his head. This is his home now. We're not running. The decision proved to be both brave and foolish. That evening, as Jake was helping Ethan with his homework, Hero suddenly stood up from his spot by the window. Every muscle in his body was tense, and his lips pulled back to reveal teeth that Jake hadn't realized were so large. Hero? Ethan looked up from his coloring book. What's wrong? Before anyone could answer, there was a knock at the door. Not a normal knock, 3 sharp raps, a pause, then 3 more, like a code. Jake's blood turned to ice. He motioned for Ethan to stay quiet and slowly approached the door. Through the peephole, he could see a man in a dark jacket, but the hallway light made it hard to see his face clearly. Who is it? Jake called. Building maintenance, came the reply. We need to check your water pressure. Jake frowned. There had been no notice about maintenance, and it was almost 8 o'clock at night. Behind him, Hero's growl was getting louder. I'll need to see some ID, Jake said through the door. Just open up, man. This will only take a minute. The man's voice had changed, less polite, more demanding. Jake's hand moved to the deadbolt, making sure it was locked. Come back tomorrow during business hours, with proper identification, Jake said firmly. There was silence from the other side of the door. Then, Jake heard something that made his heart race. The sound of footsteps, but not going away. Moving to the left, toward the window. Hero was already at the window, his hackles raised, his growl now a continuous rumble of warning. Daddy, Ethan whispered, his voice scared. Hero is really upset. Jake grabbed his phone and dialed 911, but as he did, he heard something that made his blood freeze. The sound of someone trying to open their window. They lived on the 2nd floor, but there was a fire escape. Jake had never thought about how that fire escape could be used by someone trying to get in. Hero's growl exploded into a bark, the first real bark they had heard from him, and it was terrifying. Deep, powerful, and full of protective fury. 911, what's your emergency? Someone's trying to break into my apartment, Jake said urgently, giving their address. I have my 5-year-old son here. Officers are on their way. Stay on the line. But Jake could hear the window being forced open. Whoever was out there had tools and knew how to use them. Ethan, go to your room and lock the door, Jake whispered urgently. But Ethan didn't move. Instead, he walked over to Hero and put his small hand on the dog's massive head. Protect us, Hero, he said simply. And that's when Jake saw something that would stay with him forever. Hero looked down at Ethan, and something passed between them. An understanding, a promise. The dog's aggression shifted from wild fear to controlled protection. He was no longer a scared, angry animal. He was a guardian. The window finally gave way with a crash of breaking glass. A man in dark clothing started to climb through, a flashlight in his hand, and something else. Something that looked like a tranquilizer gun. Hero moved faster than Jake thought possible. The German Shepherd launched himself at the intruder with a power and grace that spoke of his breeding and training, but this time, that training was being used to protect, not to harm. The man shouted in surprise and pain as 90 pounds of protective fury knocked him back toward the window. Hero's jaws clamped down on the man's arm, not to maim, but to control. Call him off, the intruder screamed. Call him off! But Jake wasn't about to call off the dog who was protecting his son. The man struggled, trying to reach for something in his jacket, but Hero was too smart, too well-trained. Every time the intruder moved toward a weapon, Hero adjusted his grip, applying just enough pressure to stop him without causing permanent damage. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. The intruder's eyes went wide when he heard them. This isn't over, he snarled at Jake. That dog belongs to us. We'll get him back. He belongs to us now, Ethan said from across the room, his small voice clear and strong, and we don't give up our family. The man looked at the 5-year-old boy with surprise, then at Hero, who was still holding him firmly, but hadn't increased his aggression despite the man's threats. For just a moment, something like confusion crossed the intruder's face. This wasn't the vicious, uncontrollable animal he'd expected. This was a protector, acting with intelligence and restraint. Police burst through the front door, just as the man was trying to pull free from Hero's grip. Release, Jake commanded, and Hero immediately let go, stepping back but staying between the intruder and Ethan. As the police arrested the man, Jake heard him muttering angrily into his phone. The dog's been ruined, completely ruined, no good for fighting anymore. One of the officers, Detective Maria Santos, stayed behind to take their statement. "Mr. Martinez, this man is wanted in connection with an illegal dog fighting ring. We've been trying to track them down for months." Jake felt a surge of satisfaction, but Detective Santos wasn't finished. "However, I need to warn you, this was probably just a scout. The people running these operations don't give up easily, especially when it comes to expensive animals." She looked at Hero, who was now calmly sitting beside Ethan, his protective alertness replaced by gentle watchfulness. "But I have to say," Detective Santos continued, "I've seen a lot of fighting dogs that have been rescued, and I've never seen one show this kind of controlled protection. Most of them are either too traumatized to defend anything, or they can't distinguish between threats and innocent people. Your dog," she paused, studying Hero, "your dog knew exactly what he was doing. He neutralized a threat without excessive force." "He's special," Ethan said simply, scratching behind Hero's ears. Detective Santos smiled. "I can see that." After the police left and Jake had boarded up the broken window, the three of them sat together on the couch. Hero rested his head on Ethan's lap, exhausted from the night's events. "Daddy," Ethan said quietly, "are the bad people going to come back?" Jake was quiet for a moment, considering how to answer honestly without scaring his son. "I don't know, buddy, but I know that we're going to be ready if they do." Because we have each other," Jake corrected gently. "Hero is part of our family now, and families protect each other." Hero's tail moved slightly at the word family, and Jake realized that the dog understood more than he had given him credit for. As they got ready for bed, Jake noticed something new about Hero. The dog was still gentle and loving with Ethan, still responsive to Jake's commands, but there was a new confidence in his movements. He'd faced his past and chosen his future. He'd chosen them. That night, Hero didn't just lie beside Ethan's bed. For the first time, when Ethan patted the mattress and said, "Come up, Hero," the big dog carefully climbed onto the bed and curled up next to the boy. Jake found them there the next morning, a 5-year-old boy and a 90-pound German shepherd, sleeping peacefully together, both of them safe in the knowledge that they were loved and protected. But as Jake made coffee and planned their day, he couldn't shake Detective Santos's warning. The people who had hurt Hero weren't done with them. This was just the beginning. Jake was right to be worried. Over the next 2 weeks, strange things started happening. Their mail was delivered late, sometimes not at all. The same black sedan appeared on their street at different times of day, always with tinted windows, always driving slowly past their building. Once, Jake came home from work to find their apartment door slightly ajar, though nothing inside seemed disturbed. Hero sensed the tension. The gentle, playful dog who had emerged during his recovery was still there, but underneath was a constant alertness. His ears were always moving, tracking sounds. His nose twitched constantly, analyzing scents. He had positioned himself as the family's early warning system. It was Ethan who made the connection that changed everything. "Daddy," he said one evening as they watched a movie together. Hero stretched across both their laps. "I think Hero remembers things." "What do you mean, buddy?" Ethan was quiet for a moment, absently stroking Hero's fur. "Sometimes when we're walking, he stops and looks around like he's remembering something scary. And yesterday, when that man with the baseball cap walked past us, Hero got really stiff." Jake had noticed the same thing, but hearing it from his 5-year-old son made it more real somehow. "What kind of things do you think he remembers?" "Bad things," Ethan said simply. "But also, I think he remembers how to protect people, like it's inside him, but he only uses it when he has to." That night, after Ethan had gone to bed, Jake found himself really looking at Hero for the first time since the break-in. The dog was lying by the window, but his position wasn't casual. He could see the entire living room, the front door, and had a clear view of the street. His ears were constantly moving, tracking every sound. This wasn't just a pet lying around. This was a highly trained security dog who had learned to use his skills for love instead of violence. Jake's phone rang, startling him from his thoughts. The caller ID showed Dr. Chen's number. "Jake, I need to see you tomorrow, and bring Hero. There's something we need to discuss." "Is everything okay? Is Hero sick?" "No, he's fine, but I've been doing some research, and I think I know more about Hero's background. Meet me at the clinic tomorrow at noon, and Jake, be careful." The next day, Jake felt nervous as they walked into Dr. Chen's office. Hero seemed to sense his anxiety and stayed close, occasionally looking up at Jake with concerned eyes. Dr. Chen was waiting with a thick folder and her laptop open. "Sit down," she said, her expression serious. "What I'm about to tell you might be difficult to hear." Jake sat, and Hero immediately positioned himself between Jake and the door, a behavior that had become automatic. "I've been in contact with some colleagues who work with law enforcement on animal abuse cases," Dr. Chen began. "I sent them Hero's microchip information and the photos of his scars." She opened the folder and pulled out several photographs. "These are from raids on illegal fighting operations over the past 2 years. Look at this." The first photo showed a warehouse with multiple fighting rings and dozens of caged dogs. Jake's stomach turned at the sight of the cramped, filthy conditions. "Now look at this one," Dr. Chen said, sliding another photo across the desk. This one showed a training area with heavy punching bags, treadmills, and what looked like medical equipment. But what caught Jake's attention was a large board on the wall with photos of dogs and what appeared to be statistics. "Can you see the board clearly?" Dr. Chen asked. Jake squinted at the photo, then felt his blood run cold. In the top right corner of the board was a photo of Hero, thinner, scarred, but unmistakably him. "That's him," Jake whispered. "Yes, and look at what's written under his photo." Jake read the small print beneath Hero's picture. "Subject 47, German Shepherd, resistant to aggression training, recommend termination." The words hit Jake like a physical blow. They hadn't just been starving Hero to make him aggressive. They'd been planning to kill him for refusing to become a killer. "There's more," Dr. Chen said gently. "According to the intelligence my colleagues gathered, Hero wasn't just any dog in this operation. He was being used as a test subject for their training methods." "What does that mean?" "They would try different techniques on him. Starvation, isolation, forced combat with smaller animals, electric shock training. When those methods failed to make him aggressive, they would increase the severity." Jake felt sick. "So, all those scars, most of them are from training sessions where they tried to force him to fight. But look at this." Dr. Chen pulled out a veterinary report. "The defensive wounds I showed you before, they're all on his legs and chest. There are no bite marks on his face or neck." Which means? It means that even when he was forced to defend himself, he never went for killing strikes. He never tried to seriously harm another animal, even when his own life was at stake. Jake looked down at Hero, who was sitting calmly beside his chair, occasionally looking up at him with those intelligent, gentle eyes. This dog had been tortured for months, maybe years, for the crime of being good. But Jake, there's something else. Something that might explain why they're so determined to get him back. Dr. Chen opened her laptop and turned it toward him. The screen showed what looked like a breeding chart. Hero isn't just any German Shepherd. According to this, he's from a very specific bloodline. His parents and grandparents were all highly trained protection dogs, military, police, private security. Dogs from this bloodline can sell for $20,000 to $30,000. Jake felt the air leave his lungs. 30,000? But here's the thing that makes Hero even more valuable to them. Most dogs from protection bloodlines are either naturally aggressive or easily trained to be aggressive. Hero has all the intelligence, loyalty, and protective instincts of his bloodline, but he can't be turned vicious. Why would that make him more valuable? Because it makes him the perfect breeding dog for their operation. If they could figure out how to break his resistance to violence, they could use that technique on other high-value dogs. Plus, his offspring would likely inherit his intelligence and strength, but potentially be easier to train for fighting. The full horror of the situation hit Jake all at once. They didn't just want Hero back because he was expensive. They wanted him back because he represented the key to breaking other dogs like him. "So, what do we do?" Jake asked. Before Dr. Chen could answer, Hero suddenly stood up, his body tense, his ears forward. He was staring at the office window. "What is it, boy?" Jake asked. Dr. Chen followed Hero's gaze and her face went pale. "Jake, is that the same car you've been seeing?" Outside in the parking lot, the black sedan was parked directly across from the clinic entrance. As they watched, the driver's side door opened and a man got out. He was tall, dressed in dark clothing, and he was looking directly at the clinic windows. "We need to call the police," Dr. Chen said, reaching for her phone. But as she dialed, the man outside pulled out his own phone and made a call. Seconds later, Dr. Chen's office phone rang. She looked at Jake, her eyes wide with fear, then answered, "Dr. Chen's office." Jake could hear a man's voice through the receiver, though he couldn't make out the words. Dr. Chen's face went white as she listened. "No," she said firmly. "Absolutely not." More talking from the other end. "I don't care what you're offering. That dog is not for sale." The voice on the phone got louder, more aggressive. "Are you threatening me?" Dr. Chen's voice was shaking now. "I'm hanging up and calling the police." But before she could hang up, the man outside the window held up a sign. Even from inside the office, Jake could read it clearly. "We know where the boy goes to school." Jake's world tilted. They were threatening Ethan. Dr. Chen hung up the phone and immediately dialed 911, but Jake was already moving. He grabbed Hero's leash and headed for the door. "Jake, wait! Don't go out there!" But Jake wasn't thinking clearly. The only thing in his mind was getting to Ethan's school, making sure his son was safe. He burst through the clinic's front door with Hero beside him, and immediately realized his mistake. There wasn't just one man. There were 3 of them, positioned around the parking lot. The man nearest to Jake smiled, a cold, unpleasant expression. "Mr. Martinez, we need to talk." Hero's hackles rose, and he positioned himself directly in front of Jake. His lips pulled back in a snarl that was somehow more terrifying for how controlled it was. "We don't have anything to talk about," Jake said, pulling out his phone. "The police are already on their way." "Put the phone away," the man said, and Jake noticed he was holding something in his right hand, a remote control device. "That's a very nice dog you have there. It would be a shame if something happened to him." Jake's blood turned to ice. "What is that?" "Insurance," the man replied. "See, when dogs escape from our operation, we like to make sure we can still control them, if necessary. That collar Hero was wearing when you found him, it wasn't just for show." Jake looked down amid Hero's neck. The scars from the tight collar were still visible, but there was something else, a tiny bump under the skin that Jake had assumed was scar tissue. "That's right," the man continued, seeing Jake's realization. "Surgically implanted shock device, military grade, and this little remote can activate it from up to half a mile away." Hero seemed to sense the threat. His body was coiled like a spring, ready to attack, but something was holding him back, some memory of pain. "So, here's what's going to happen," the man said conversationally. "You're going to hand over that leash, we're going to take our property back, and you and your son get to go on with your lives. Everyone wins." "He's not your property," Jake said, his voice stronger than he felt. "He's family." The man laughed. "Family? Mr. Martinez, that animal has killed 12 dogs in fighting rings. He's torn apart more opponents than any dog we've ever trained. You think he's some kind of pet?" Jake looked down at Hero, who was trembling slightly. Not from fear, Jake realized, but from the effort of controlling himself. "You're lying," Jake said. "Am I? Look at his scars again. Really look at them. Those aren't all defensive wounds." For just a moment, doubt crept into Jake's mind. What if he was wrong about Hero? What if the dog really was dangerous? But then he remembered something Ethan had said. He's not mean. He's just hurt inside his heart. "I don't care what he did before," Jake said firmly. "I know who he is now." The man's expression hardened. "Then you're a fool, and your son is going to pay for your foolishness." That was the moment Hero made his choice. The German Shepherd looked up at Jake, then back at the man with the remote. Something passed across his face. A decision. A resolve. Hero took a step forward, directly toward the man who was threatening his family. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," the man said, holding up the remote. "One push of this button, and your dog will be writhing on the ground in agony." Hero took another step. "I'm warning you." But Hero didn't stop. He walked slowly, deliberately, toward the man who had the power to hurt him. With each step, his head lifted higher, his shoulders squared. He wasn't attacking. He was showing that he wasn't afraid. The man pressed the button. Nothing happened. Hero took another step, and Jake saw something incredible in the dog's eyes. Not aggression, not hatred, but determination. The determination of someone who had decided that some things were worth any amount of pain. "What the hell?" The man pressed the button again, frantically. Still nothing. Dr. Chen's voice called out from behind Jake. "The shock device was removed during his surgery. I took it out the first night." The man's face went white with rage and fear as he realized his control was gone. Hero was 3 feet away now, moving with the calm confidence of a dog who knew exactly what he was capable of. "Stop!" the man shouted, pulling out a gun. "Stop, or I'll shoot." But Hero didn't stop. He simply sat down directly in front of the man, looked up at him, and waited. The man stood there, gun in hand, staring down at a dog who was offering himself as a target rather than allow his family to be threatened. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. "This isn't over," the man snarled, backing toward his car. "We'll find another way." As the three men fled, Jake knelt down beside Hero and wrapped his arms around the dog's neck. "You could have been killed," Jake whispered. Hero turned his massive head and gently licked Jake's face, as if to say, "That's what family does." When the police arrived, Detective Santos took one look at the situation and shook her head. "Mr. Martinez, these people aren't going to give up. We're dealing with a multi-million-dollar operation, and they see your dog as valuable property. What do you suggest?" Detective Santos was quiet for a moment, then pulled Jake aside. "There's something I haven't told you. We've been working on a sting operation to take down this entire ring. We need someone on the inside, someone they trust." "What does that have to do with us?" "Hero wasn't just any fighting dog, Jake. He was their prize breeding male. If we could get him back into their operation, with the right surveillance equipment..." Jake felt his heart stop. "You want to use Hero as bait? It's the only way to get them all. And Jake, it's the only way to make sure they never come after your family again." Jake stared at Detective Santos in disbelief. "You want me to hand over my dog to the people who tortured him?" "Not hand him over. Work with us. We've been tracking this organization for 2 years, Jake. They call themselves the Red Circle, and they're responsible for dogfighting rings in 6 states. Hero is our best chance to get inside their operation." Jake looked down at Hero, who was sitting calmly beside him, completely unaware that his fate was being discussed. "What exactly are you asking?" "We have an undercover agent who's been trying to infiltrate the Red Circle for months. If Hero were to escape from you and be recaptured by our agent, we could get inside their main facility." "And then what? Hero becomes a fighting dog again?" Detective Santos shook her head. "No. Our agent would make sure Hero never actually fights, but his presence would give us access to their breeding program, their financial records, their entire network." Jake felt sick at the thought. How long? "Maybe 2 weeks, a month at most." "A month?" Jake's voice cracked. "Do you have any idea what that would do to him? What it would do to my son?" Before Detective Santos could answer, Dr. Chen approached them. "Jake, I couldn't help but overhear. There's something else you need to know." She led them back into her office and pulled out a new file. "I've been analyzing Hero's blood work from when we first brought him in. He has markers that suggest he's been given performance-enhancing drugs, steroids, stimulants, things that would make him more aggressive and build muscle mass." Jake felt his stomach drop. "Is he addicted?" "No, thankfully. But here's the concerning part. The drugs were administered regularly over a long period, probably years. If the Red Circle gets him back, they'll put him back on that regimen immediately. What would that do to him?" Dr. Chen's expression was grave. "The psychological effects could be devastating. These drugs don't just affect the body, they affect behavior, decision-making, emotional control. Hero has worked so hard to overcome his trauma. If they put him back on those drugs..." She didn't need to finish. Jake understood. They would turn Hero back into the weapon they'd tried to create, and this time it might be permanent. "There has to be another way," Jake said desperately. Detective Santos was quiet for a moment, then pulled out her phone. "There might be. Let me make a call." While she stepped outside, Jake sat down heavily in a chair. Hero immediately came over and rested his massive head on Jake's knee, sensing his distress. "What are we going to do, boy?" Jake whispered, scratching behind Hero's ears. Hero looked up at him with those intelligent eyes, and Jake could swear the dog understood every word. Ethan's voice came from the clinic's waiting room. "Daddy, where are you?" Jake's heart jumped. "In here, buddy!" Ethan appeared in the doorway, still wearing his school backpack. "Miss Rodriguez said you called the school and told them to bring me here. Is Hero okay?" Jake looked at his son's worried face and felt a surge of protective anger. These people had threatened a 5-year-old child. They'd forced Ethan to live in fear, to be escorted from school by police officers. "Hero's fine, buddy, but we need to talk about some things." Ethan sat down in the chair next to Jake, and Hero immediately positioned himself between the boy and the door, his protective instincts never fully at rest. "Are the bad people coming back?" Ethan asked quietly. Jake was trying to figure out how to answer when Detective Santos returned, her expression more hopeful than before. I just spoke with my captain and the FBI task force that's been working this case. They're willing to try a different approach. What kind of approach? Instead of sending Hero back undercover, we use him to draw them out, set up a controlled situation where they think they can take him, but it's actually a trap. Dr. Chen frowned. That sounds even more dangerous. Not if we do it right. We choose the location, we control the variables, and we have backup positioned everywhere. The key is making them believe they're getting what they want while ensuring everyone stays safe. Jake looked down at Hero, who was now lying across both his and Ethan's feet, his way of keeping his entire family close and protected. What would Hero's role be? He'd be the bait, but he'd never be out of our sight, and we'd have the element of surprise. Ethan spoke up suddenly. Hero doesn't want to go back to those people. I can tell. Both adults looked at the 5-year-old boy. How can you tell, buddy? Jake asked. Ethan reached down and gently touched one of the scars on Hero's neck. When I touch his old hurts, he gets sad. But when I touch his new hurts, like from when he protected us, he gets proud. Jake felt his throat tighten. His son understood something about trauma and healing that most adults never learned. What do you think we should do? Jake asked Ethan, surprising Detective Santos with the question. Ethan was quiet for a moment, looking seriously at Hero. I think Hero wants to stop the bad people from hurting other dogs, but he's scared they'll make him bad again. Out of the mouths of babes, Jake realized his 5-year-old son had just summarized the entire situation perfectly. What if we could make sure they never get the chance to make him bad? Jake asked. How? Detective Santos leaned forward. We end this once and for all. We take down their entire operation, arrest everyone involved, and rescue all the other dogs. Jake looked at Hero, then at Ethan, then back at Detective Santos. Tell me exactly how this would work. Over the next hour, Detective Santos laid out the plan. It was risky, but it was also comprehensive. The FBI had been building a case against the Red Circle for months, but they needed evidence from inside their main facility. Hero would be the key to getting that evidence. The plan was complex but elegant. Jake and Hero would appear to be going about their normal routine, walking in the park, visiting the pet store, going to Ethan's soccer practice. But they would be under constant surveillance by undercover agents. When the Red Circle made their move, and Detective Santos was certain they would, the agents would allow the kidnapping to appear successful. Hero would be taken to their main facility, but he would be wearing hidden GPS trackers and audio devices. The moment they had enough evidence to convict everyone involved, the FBI would move in. How long would Hero be with them? Jake asked. Probably less than 24 hours. We've been monitoring their communications, and they're planning something big, a major fighting event with buyers coming in from across the country. Hero's presence would likely trigger that event. And you're sure he'd be safe? Detective Santos hesitated. Jake, I can't promise there's no risk, but I can promise that we'll have agents monitoring his location constantly, and we'll move in the moment there's any sign of danger. Jake looked at Hero, who had been listening to the entire conversation, with the kind of attention that suggested he understood far more than a normal dog should. What do you think, boy? Want to help catch the bad guys? Hero's tail moved slightly, and he looked directly at Jake with an expression that seemed to say, if it keeps our family safe, I'm ready. That evening, back at their apartment, Jake sat Ethan down for the most serious conversation they'd ever had. Buddy, I need to explain what's going to happen over the next few days. Ethan listened carefully as Jake explained the plan in terms a 5-year-old could understand. Hero was going to pretend to be captured by the bad people so the police could catch them and rescue all the other dogs. But he'll come home, right? Ethan asked, his small voice worried. Yes, but for a little while, it might look like the bad people took him away. Ethan was quiet for a long moment, then crawled over to where Hero was lying and whispered something in the dog's ear. Hero's tail wagged softly, and he licked Ethan's face. What did you tell him? Jake asked. I told him to be brave but not too brave, and to remember that we love him no matter what. That night, Jake barely slept. He kept thinking about all the things that could go wrong, all the ways the plan could fail. But every time he started to change his mind, he remembered the man with the gun, the threat against Ethan, the dozens of other dogs still trapped in the Red Circle's operation. This wasn't just about Hero anymore. It was about stopping monsters who tortured animals for profit. The next morning dawned gray and cold. Jake went through their normal routine, breakfast, coffee, reading the news. But everything felt surreal, like he was watching someone else's life. Hero seemed to sense the tension. He stayed close to both Jake and Ethan, more protective than usual. At exactly 10 a.m., Jake's phone rang. Detective Santos. They took the bait. We intercepted communications this morning. They're planning to grab Hero during your usual walk in Riverside Park. Are you ready? Jake looked at Hero, who was sitting by the door with his leash in his mouth, ready for their walk. As ready as we'll ever be. Remember, Jake, when it happens, don't resist. Let them take him. We'll be watching every second. And if something goes wrong, nothing will go wrong. I promise you that. But as Jake hung up the phone and clipped the leash to Hero's collar, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to walk into something that would change all their lives forever. Hero looked up at him with complete trust, ready to face whatever came next for the sake of his family. Jake took a deep breath, opened the door, and stepped out into the morning that would determine Hero's fate. Riverside Park looked exactly as it always did on a Tuesday morning. Joggers traced the winding paths, dog owners chatted while their pets played, and children laughed on the playground equipment. But Jake knew that hidden among these ordinary people were FBI agents, waiting and watching. Hero walked beside him with his usual calm dignity, but Jake could sense the dog's heightened awareness. His ears moved constantly, tracking every sound. His nose twitched, analyzing every scent. Somehow, Hero understood that today was different. They followed their normal route past the duck pond, where Hero always paused to watch the waterfowl. But today, the German Shepherd barely glanced at the ducks. His attention was focused on something else. Jake's phone buzzed with a text from Detective Santos. 2 vehicles spotted. Gray van at north entrance. Black SUV near playground. Stay calm. Jake's heart started pounding, but he forced himself to maintain their leisurely pace. Hero seemed to pick up on his anxiety and move slightly closer, their usual protective formation. They were approaching the wooded section of the park when Hero suddenly stopped. His entire body went rigid, and a low growl rumbled in his chest. "What is it, boy?" Jake asked, but he already knew. From behind a cluster of oak trees, 3 men emerged. Jake recognized the leader immediately. It was the same man from the veterinary clinic, the one who had threatened Ethan. "Mr. Martinez," the man called out pleasantly, as if they were old friends meeting by chance. "What a lovely morning for a walk." Jake's mouth went dry. "Stay away from us." The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Now, that's not very friendly. We just want to have a conversation." Hero's growl deepened, and he positioned himself directly between Jake and the approaching men. Jake could see the other 2 men spreading out, trying to flank them. "There's nothing to talk about," Jake said, pulling out his phone. "I'm calling the police." "I wouldn't do that if I were you," the leader said, and Jake noticed he was holding something in his hand. Not a gun this time, but a small device that looked like a garage door opener. "You see, we've learned from our previous encounters. This little device sends a signal to explosive charges we've placed around the park." Jake felt his blood turn to ice. "You're lying." "Am I? Take a look around, Mr. Martinez. See all those families enjoying their morning? That jogger with the baby stroller? Those children on the swings? One press of this button, and this peaceful park becomes a tragedy." Jake's eyes darted around the park, suddenly seeing potential threats everywhere. Was that man sitting on the bench really reading, or was he watching them? Was that woman with the stroller actually an innocent bystander? "What do you want?" Jake asked, his voice barely steady. "What we've always wanted. Our property back." Hero's hackles rose even higher at the word property, and Jake could see the dog fighting every instinct to attack. "He's not your property, he's family." The man laughed. "Family? Mr. Martinez, that animal has been trained since birth to be a weapon. The only reason he hasn't torn you apart is because we haven't activated his conditioning yet. You're wrong about him." "Am I? Watch this." The man pulled out a small whistle and blew 3 short, sharp blasts. Hero's reaction was immediate and terrifying. The gentle dog Jake knew vanished, replaced by something primal and dangerous. Hero's lips pulled back in a snarl that revealed every one of his massive teeth. His eyes changed, becoming cold and predatory. For a moment that felt like eternity, Jake thought Hero was going to attack him. But then something incredible happened. Hero's gaze found Jake's face, and Jake saw the dog fighting against whatever the whistle had triggered. Hero's entire body was shaking with the effort of resisting his programming. "Good dog," Jake whispered. You're stronger than they are." The leader's confident expression faltered. "That's impossible. That conditioning can't be broken." But Hero proved him wrong. With visible effort, the German Shepherd forced his body to relax. The snarl faded, replaced by the gentle expression Jake knew and loved. "You underestimated him," Jake said, his voice growing stronger. "You tried to break him, but you couldn't, and you can't now." The leader's face darkened with rage. "We'll see about that." He raised the detonator. "You have 10 seconds to hand over that leash, or I start blowing up families." Jake looked around the park at all the innocent people, the children, the families, the elderly couples feeding ducks. He couldn't let them be hurt because of Hero. But as he reached for Hero's leash, the German Shepherd did something that changed everything. Hero stepped forward, directly toward the man with the detonator, and sat down. Then he looked back at Jake with an expression of complete trust and love. The message was clear. "Whatever happens to me, don't let them hurt innocent people." The leader sneered. "Smart dog. He knows when he's beaten." But Hero wasn't beaten. As the man reached for his leash, Hero's head snapped up, and his jaws clamped down on the detonator. "No!" the leader shouted, trying to pull the device away. But Hero held on, his powerful jaws crushing the electronics. When he finally released it, the detonator was in pieces. That's when all hell broke loose. FBI agents emerged from seemingly everywhere, behind trees, from inside maintenance vehicles, even dressed as joggers and dog walkers. The entire park had been a carefully orchestrated trap. "FBI, nobody move!" The leader and his companions tried to run, but they were surrounded within seconds. As handcuffs clicked into place, the leader snarled at Jake. "This isn't over. There are others. They'll never stop coming for that dog." Detective Santos appeared beside Jake, slightly out of breath. "Actually, it is over." She held up a tablet showing aerial footage of simultaneous raids happening across the city. "While you were keeping these guys busy, we were hitting all their facilities. 6 warehouses, 2 training compounds, and their main headquarters. We've got everyone." Jake felt his knees go weak with relief. "Everyone. Everyone. The red circle is finished." As the arrested men were led away, Jake knelt down beside Hero, who was sitting calmly as if nothing unusual had happened. "How did you know to destroy the detonator?" Jake asked. Hero tilted his massive head and looked at Jake with an expression that seemed to say, "I've been watching and learning." Detective Santos crouched down beside them. "Jake, there's something you should know. That detonator, it was fake. We've been monitoring their communications for weeks. They never had any explosives in the park." Jake stared at her. "What?" "It was all a bluff to scare you into compliance. But Hero..." She looked at the German Shepherd with amazement. Somehow he knew. Dogs can sense electronic devices, but to react that specifically to a fake threat? That takes intelligence beyond anything I've ever seen. As they walked home from the park, Jake's phone rang. It was Ethan's school. "Mr. Martinez, this is Principal Williams. We just wanted to let you know that we heard about what happened on the news. Is Ethan okay?" Jake had forgotten that the story would make the news. "He's fine. We're all fine. The children are calling Hero a hero dog. They want to know if he can visit the school." Jake looked down at Hero, who was walking beside him with quiet dignity, completely unaware that he was about to become famous. That evening, their apartment was full of visitors. Dr. Chen came by to check on Hero and ended up staying for dinner. Detective Santos stopped by to deliver some paperwork and wound up helping Ethan with his homework. Even some of their neighbors dropped by to meet the dog who had taken down a criminal organization. But the most important visitor was a woman named Lisa Chen, no relation to Dr. Chen, who worked for the FBI's Animal Rescue Division. "Mr. Martinez," she said, "we recovered 47 dogs from the Red Circle's facilities today. 47 dogs who are alive because of what Hero did." Jake felt his throat tighten with emotion. What will happen to them? They'll all need medical care and rehabilitation. Some may never be suitable for adoption because of their trauma, but some, she smiled, some will find families just like Hero did. Ethan looked up from where he was sitting on the floor with Hero. "Can we meet them?" "Actually," Lisa said, "we were hoping Hero might be willing to help with their rehabilitation. Dogs who have been through trauma often respond better to other dogs who understand what they've experienced." Jake looked at Hero, who seemed to be listening to every word. "What do you think, boy? Want to help your friends?" Hero's tail wagged, and he walked over to Lisa, sitting down beside her as if to say, When do we start? 6 months later, Jake stood in the backyard of the new house they had been able to buy with the reward money from the FBI. It wasn't much, just 3 bedrooms and a small yard, but it was theirs. Hero was lying in the shade of an oak tree, surrounded by 3 other dogs. Max, a scarred pit bull who had been rescued from the Red Circle. Bella, a small terrier mix who still flinched at loud noises. And Duke, an older German shepherd who had been one of Hero's former cage mates. All 3 were foster dogs who lived with other families now, but they came to visit Hero every week for what Dr. Chen had started calling therapy sessions. Hero seemed to have a natural ability to calm traumatized animals, helping them learn to trust again. Ethan, now 6 years old, was playing fetch with all 4 dogs. His throwing arm had improved considerably over the months, and his understanding of animal behavior amazed the adults who watched him work with the rescue dogs. "Daddy," Ethan called out, "Duke is ready for his own family now. Look!" Jake watched as the older German shepherd, who had cowered in fear for the first 3 months after his rescue, confidently caught a tennis ball and brought it back to Ethan with his tail wagging. Dr. Chen, who had become a regular dinner guest, looked up from the barbecue grill. "I think you're right. Duke's come a long way." "They all have," Jake said, watching Hero gently encouraging Bella to join the game. That evening, after their guests had gone home and Ethan was in bed, Jake sat on the back porch with Hero beside him. The German shepherd rested his massive head on Jake's lap, content and peaceful. "You know what I realized today?" Jake said, scratching behind Hero's ears. "That night we found you in the rain, I thought we were saving you. But really, you were saving us." Hero looked up at him with those intelligent, gentle eyes that had first captured Ethan's heart. "You taught us what it means to choose love over fear, to protect instead of attack, to heal instead of hurt." Hero's tail moved slightly, and he pressed closer to Jake's side. "And you taught us that sometimes the most broken things become the most beautiful when they're given a chance to heal." Jake looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. There were always more rescue dogs who needed help, more families who needed to learn about compassion, more work to be done. But tonight, sitting in his own backyard with his son sleeping safely inside and his loyal dog beside him, Jake Martinez had everything he needed. He had family, he had love, and he had the knowledge that sometimes, when you're brave enough to stop for someone in need on a rainy night, you don't just change their life, you change your own. Hero sighed contentedly and closed his eyes, finally at peace. The scared, broken dog who had been chained in a junkyard was gone forever, replaced by something stronger and more beautiful, a protector, a healer, a hero in every sense of the word. And as the stars came out above their little house, Hero dreamed not of fighting rings and pain, but of playing fetch with Ethan, helping other dogs find their courage, and the warm feeling of being exactly where he belonged. The story that began with rain and abandonment had ended with sunshine and love. And if you asked Ethan, he would tell you that's exactly how the best stories should end. Don't forget to like this story and share it with others who need to hear about the power of love and second chances. Comment below and tell us where you're watching from. We love hearing from families around the world who believe in giving rescue animals the love they deserve. And remember to subscribe for more incredible true stories that will restore your faith in the goodness of people and the amazing bonds we can form with our 4-legged family members.